Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
And here we are. Welcome back. This is Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, talking all about books and writing and stuff. Today with us, through the magic of modern technology, we have from Cornwall, somewhere in Cornwall, England, Jane Johnson. So is it tea time where you are, Jane?
It is literally tea time, Dennis. I can actually hear my husband making tea in the background.
So tea time is still a big thing in England, I take it.
We don't make a big fuss about it, but yes, we do like a cup of tea in the afternoon.
Now, my people, if you want to call it that, on my father's side, I'm only a second-generation Canadian. He was born here, but my grandparents came from Southport, so...
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's not far back at all, is it?
No, they came in 1911.
Yeah.
By steamship and all that stuff. So half my aunts and uncles
proper
were
pioneering.
Well, almost. We're talking with Jane Johnson. She's in England. We're here in the middle of nowhere in Saskatchewan. Jane, your early life. Tell us a little bit about what went on before you came out with The Seagate.
Well, I was raised in Cornwall, which is a beautiful remote part of the UK, and so was allowed to roam wild as a child, and I absolutely loved it. But then you get into your teens, and it's one of those places where there's not a great deal to do, and you just can't wait to get away. So I ran away to London when I was 17. And started university the following year, and then I just never went away from London until I was in my mid-40s, after quite a considerable career in publishing. I started writing historical novels with my first book, The 10th Gift, which was about the Barbary raiders from the north of Morocco who had sailed into the bay here in Cornwall, where I come from, and they had taken captive 60 men, women and children and carried them off with them to North Africa to sell into the slave trade, and among them an ancestor of mine. So I went off to Morocco to research this story, and while I was there I met my husband Abdulatif, who is a Berber tribesman, and we were married later that year. So that changed my life rather considerably. Several of the books that I've written since then have had a North African connection, and Seagate, the new one, is no exception. Even though it's set here in Cornwall during the Second World War, you'd be surprised how many connections stretch across the continents.
And I've just started reading Seagate, The Seagate by Jane Johnson, who is with us today from England. And the main character's name is Rebecca, and I just finished watching the new Rebecca movie on Netflix. So, what
did you think of it?
Oh, I thought it was excellent. What did you think?
Well, I had mixed feelings about it. I thought it was absolutely beautiful to look at. I thought, the characters and their costumes and the settings were so lovely. But I'm a big fan of the original book, and it's got a lot more menace in it, I think. There's a lot more tension and menace, and I kind of missed that aspect in this new version. But I did enjoy it, I have to say. I sat very happily through it. And,
yes.
And just felt that it missed what Hitchcock had picked up on in his version.
So did Daphne du Maurier have any influence on your writing, do you think?
Oh, enormously so, because I actually was raised in Foy, which is where she used to live. So everything was about du Maurier down there, and I read her at an inappropriately young age. So she's very imprinted on me.
Well, in Canada, the only connection I had is they used to have du Maurier cigarettes here, so...
right.
So you started out, not started out, but one of your earlier jobs before the Seagate and the 10th Gift was an editor for people such as George R. R. Martin and Dean Koontz. How did you switch from that to more gritty novels?
Well, I'm still doing that job. I do that. That's my day job. So 4 days a week, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm publishing people like George R.R. and Robin Hobb and Mark Lawrence and various exceptionally good fantasy writers, Raymond Feist, and then Dean Koontz and several thriller writers as well. So yes, quite hard to switch between that and writing my own work from time to time. It's quite a different mindset, editing to writing. And especially when you're having to squeeze it into 3 days, you can lose the thread of where you are. It can be quite frustrating sometimes. But I definitely think it makes me a better editor because I do understand the problems that writers face, having faced them myself.
Now, what exactly does an editor do? A lot of people, such as myself, think that you're just basically a proofreader, but that's far from the truth, right?
Yeah, no, my title is publishing director, and basically I'm in charge of taking the writer on right from the very beginning. So I read manuscripts when they come in and decide whether we're going to publish them or not, and then take them through the various processes of a publishing meeting and get all the team on board and enthused about it. And only when the full text is delivered do I start in on the work on the manuscript itself. But that's quite a big part of my job, so you're not that far wrong. But I do like to work with writers on their texts. I find it absolutely fascinating because every writer is different.
And as an editor, and you see a lot of first-time efforts, I'm sure, is there a couple, 2 or 3 things you can mention that people just starting out seem to always get wrong?
Well, no, every writer is different, and everybody makes their own type of mistakes. even the most well-seasoned writers will make their own mistakes. So I think the most crucial thing that I was ever told was that to really get your readers gripped, you need to thrust them straight into the story. And I found myself when writing that sometimes you start writing your story too early. So you can often find by the time you get to the end of a manuscript that you can chop a couple of chapters off the front of it without losing anything crucial. And the other thing that I think is really important is authenticity of dialogue. So I always carry a notebook around with me, and I often take note of what people are saying and exactly how they say it. I think it's very important to get the rhythms of dialogue right, a sense of conversation, because that can move a story along faster than almost anything.
Jane Johnson is with us. Her latest novel is The Seagate. Just came out here in Canada from Simon & Schuster. As an editor some days of the week, and then you're writing your own work some other days of the week, then do other editors edit your work?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, no, an editor's a very crucial part of the process, and you get so close to your own work that you have no perspective on it by the time you've finished it. So it's absolutely important to have somebody who knows what they're doing come to it with a clear, cold eye. Everybody makes mistakes, and everybody needs feedback, and we all require editing, so it's very important indeed.
Now, how do you not get your back up when an editor tells you that you're not doing something right when, as an editor, you would have passed it maybe? I don't know.
Nobody likes being edited.
Mm-hmm.
It's the nature of the game. I remember an author of mine say that when she got my editorial notes through, she would go into the bathroom and scream for about 10 minutes and then she would calm down and come back out and start to go through them again. that's not so far off what everybody feels like, I think.
So we're talking with Jane Johnson. She's in England. We're here in Saskatchewan. Your husband, you say, is a Berber chef, so I guess you get some pretty good meals out of the deal?
Oh, I do. I tell him that I married him for his lentil soup.
And have you watched The Crown?
Do you know, I've just started it 2 nights ago. It's great fun. I'm thoroughly enjoying this season.
Yes. Are you a monarchist or a non-monarchist?
Well, I'm somewhere in between, actually. I don't have hugely strong views on the subject. I think the Queen is a remarkable woman. I think she's exactly the same age as my mother, although my mother is deceased now. But they almost shared a birthday, and I see so much in common between the two of them. And I do actually think that she's a tremendous ambassador for this country. So I'm not a monarchist. I'm not hugely pro the idea of people being tremendously privileged and having lots of free rides. But right. I do think she's quite remarkable, and I do enjoy seeing her on TV and listening to what she has to say. She was very much a steadying hand for us, I think, earlier this year during the COVID crisis.
I agree. That's exactly my sentiment. I think if it wasn't for the person that Queen Elizabeth II has been, and I don't know how long she'll go on, but it might have spurred in Canada anyway lots more anti-monarchist type feelings. I know in Quebec they don't care. They don't like anything about Canada or England or anything like that. So that's fine. They can go their own way. Just keep the hockey teams. That's all I care about. But yeah, The Crown, the behind the scenes stuff is like the people, they don't have lives of their own at all. From the time you get up, somebody's helping you dress and somebody probably wipes your butt when you poo. I don't know, but it's just, it's ridiculous. It's just crazy.
It was ever thus with the royal family. I mean, honestly, I don't know how anybody lives with that amount of scrutiny.
So we're talking with Jane Johnson. The book we're discussing right now is The Sea Gate, and it opens up in the first couple of pages. I get the feeling that the sister of the narrator, who's named Rebecca, by the way, the narrator, the sister seems like she's a sort of an entitled little snippet. Is that right?
She's the sister-in-law, in fact.
Sister-in-law.
She's horrendous.
That's right, sister-in-law. So she seems a bit snarky.
Yeah, you could definitely say that. Yeah, no, you should hate her. I'm glad you do.
Oh, good. And what happens is the narrator goes to a lonely seaside, gloomy house to help her mother's cousin. This is after Mummy dies. And England and Canada, we say mum. In America, they go mom. So that drives me nuts. But and I used to live there for 20 years. So she ends up restoring the house, and then the fun begins. So how did this story all evolve for you?
Well, you can never quite pin down where these stories come from. I had been thinking of writing something which was just in living memory in Cornwall, because there were a lot of older people in the village here who were dying year by year, and I just thought how awful that their stories are not being carried on. And so I set out and I interviewed a number of the old folk here who remembered the war and had been here during the war. And they had so many fascinating stories to tell. And then in addition to that, my mother, who was here for part of the war as well, was ill. And I thought, I really need to hear from her all her tales now so that I don't forget them and I can honour them in writing about them. So that's partly what caused The Sea Gate to come about. And then also we had a family secret fall out of the closet. And that also made me start thinking about the family secrets that came out of the war, because it was a very good time to hide these things away. It was such chaos that people got away with murder, literally.
And the result is the Seagate. Now it's giving me a bit of a creepy feeling. I'm only in chapter 3. I'm sorry to be so slow in reading it, but the caretaker guy Jem, he seems rather odd to say the least, and then the parrot who squawks away in worse language than even I use. And I'm a radio guy and a hockey player, so you can imagine how I talk in real life. Is that sort of the intention you had, was just to start this feeling of foreboding almost right from the start?
Good. Yeah, no, I think old houses are sort of filled with memories and extraordinary experiences, and I think the whole fabric of them is filled with it. And I wanted the house itself to have a character of its own, and I'm glad that you're feeling the spookiness of it. It's not just spooky. It's this is a book that has lots of different levels to it. There's love stories and happiness and deep tragedy as well. So there's all sorts coming your way if you carry on.
Oh, yeah.
But the parrot is a particular favourite of mine. In the previous house that I used to have, I was told that the previous owner actually had a parrot, and she was a lay preacher, so you'd expect it to have been an extremely well-behaved parrot, but in fact she used to put it outside in its cage, and it would swear horribly at passers-by. So I thought I had to use that. That's a gift, really, to a writer.
Oh, exactly. Jane Johnson is with us. We're talking about The Seagate, her latest. But you have another writing life, or had one, under the name of Jude Fisher. What's that all about?
Well, I was the publisher of J.R.R. Tolkien's books for a long time, and then in 1999, I took a phone call from a chap called Peter Jackson, who said that he was going to be making a movie of Lord of the Rings. And I was very dubious about this at the time.
Right.
I couldn't see how it could be done well. And then in 2000, he invited me down to New Zealand to their set and on location with them. And it was just the most extraordinary time. It was truly like entering Middle-earth. I had been the publisher who was responsible for bringing the illustrators Alan Lee and John Howe and Ted Naismith onto illustrating Tolkien and the books and the calendars. And he had used all three of them as his conceptual artists on the movie. And so, my view of Middle-earth, which was very much encapsulated in those wonderful artists' view of Middle-earth, suddenly was unfurling in front of me, in the midst of extraordinary New Zealand landscape and this wonderful cast. And so I stayed on with them for months and ended up writing the visual companions to the movie. So it was a hell of a trip. It was really quite extraordinary.
Sounds wonderful. What are you working on now for Jane Johnson, the author? Anything new coming out?
Yeah, I'm working on a new novel at the moment, which has some spooky aspects to it and a bit of Old English folklore in there, and a remote Cornish community. So it's coming into focus a bit more now. There's lots of little bits and pieces coming together, and it's about a third of the way through.
And one more question before we have to wrap it up. I'm expecting a call from my orthopedic surgeon so I can get knee replacement surgery. Oh, won't that be fun? One question, a very important question that people in Canada have wondered for seems like a lot. What does Boris Johnson ever comb his hair?
Well, I have to say, he did an address to the nation yesterday, and he looked worse than usual. And I said to my husband, he's obviously in isolation at the moment because nobody has said to him, Boris, you need to comb your hair. It's in a worse state than usual.
Oh, what is the state of affairs in the UK right now with all these COVID shutdowns and all this kind of stuff?
Well, of course, our shutdowns have all come too late, and it's been a pretty dire picture here. I'm afraid decisions took too long to take and were not implemented correctly, and mask wearing came in much too late in the day. So yes, it's not been the greatest picture in the UK. We've lost over 50,000 people by official figures alone, and I'm looking forward to the vaccines coming through.
I think so. And Brexit, how's that going? Or should I ask?
Don't even ask about the B word.
Okay.
Oh dear. I mean, really, what a disaster all around, and terrible, terrible timing. You couldn't make it up. So I'm still hoping, with a dying hope that some small deal can be made at the end of the day. But, we're coming into the last week of those transition talks. So heaven knows what's coming towards us in the new year.
Exactly. And Jane Johnson is with us. The book is The Sea Gate. What do you hope readers take away from The Sea Gate, rather, other than just pure enjoyment?
Well, pure enjoyment is quite a good thing, I think.
Yep.
And a certain amount of escape from our current nightmare. I do think it's a lot of people have said that that it's a book that they've torn through, in that it's made them want to read on and on as fast as possible. So that's always a good thing. But it's also, I would hope, there are certain modern parallels about how we treat other people, how we see other people. And especially, I think, about older people, how it's very easy, I think, for the young not to see them as human beings, in their own right, with lots of vivid life experience. And I would hope, with my extremely cantankerous and eccentric central character, Olivia, she has had the most extraordinary life. And she remains, I hope, vibrant and interesting in her 90s. So I would hope it helps us all to connect with older people again.
And that's Jane Johnson. The book is The Sea Gate. Simon & Schuster here in Canada and around the world, I'm sure, from other publishers. So Jane Johnson, thank you very much for your time today.
Oh, it's a pleasure talking to you, Dennis. Thank you.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.